A few years ago, I grew a customer account from €8,000 to €600,000 in 2 years. And that was without an upsell campaign or a product launch. I just understood their business more than most of their own colleagues did. And that customer didn't grow just because I had clever sales strategy. Far from it. It grew because I never stopped treating the customer's success as more important than any of my own targets. And the very first conversation through to every milestone, through to the renewal and the next, to the point where I had a key customer inviting me to lunch just to think out loud with me because she saw me as a true thought partner and an extension to her business. And that's true customer centricity. It's not about the value that you've got on the wall or what's at stake. It's a way of operating from start to finish. And today I want to show you why that's so rare. Because between the first sales conversation and a customer who wouldn't even imagine leaving, there are 7 key moments where the relationship can either deepen or break. And behind every one of those moments, there's a team, there's a system, and ultimately a decision, usually a founder's decision, your decision that either sets people up to succeed or doesn't. Hi, I'm Emily Bastrop, co-founder of Growth Debunked, and with over 20 years of customer-led growth experience, today I'd spend my time advising Series A and B scale-ups and their teams on how to deliver consistent customer-led growth, starting from the outside in. So let's start where your customer starts. Your customer goes on a journey with you from the minute that they connect with you and get aware of your brand, all the way until they become a deepened customer relationship over many years. And the first stage that we're going to look at, I'm cutting out the marketing experience here, as that may be very much an online piece. And the focus of today's video is really to look at the human interaction that your customer has throughout the life cycle of their experience with you. So the first stage that we're looking at is actually the sales experience. This is where your entire relationship is seeded. So the question we're asking here is not, did we close the customer? It's more, did they feel understood? Are we aligning the partnership based on a clear understanding of their needs and a roadmap to solve those needs, linked to a clear vision of service? Because there's a big difference between a customer who bought just because they were sold to and one who bought because they saw that their problem was clearly reflected back at them and that you were the uniquely placed solution to solve that problem. And when that goes well, your customer arrives at the next stage, which is actually closing the deal with a lot more clarity as to the value that they're going to get in partnering with you. They know what they signed up for. They also know what success looks like. And they know who's responsible for what. When it doesn't happen like that, you'll get the first moment that matters, which is the expectation gap. When a customer arrives at onboarding expecting one thing, and the customer success team is delivering something completely different, then the space between those two things is where the trust starts to erode. The next stage is stage 3, onboarding. And here the question is simple. Does the customer feel safe or abandoned? Are you giving them the white glove treatment that helps them to translate their expectations of what you're going to deliver as you work with them into a tangible setup for a successful partnership? And if they feel safe, they will move to stage 4, which is time to value. They don't feel any gaps or handover issues as they move from one to the other. So they know what their next milestone is and they're able to see the early wins. If, on the other hand, they feel abandoned, then frankly, the clock is ticking, and it's ticking for them, not for you. Stage 5 is all about embedding. Here, we want to see the product get either woven into how the customer work or sit next to it as a bolt-on, tolerated. When it's woven in, it actually means that the product touches the customer's goals. It means that customer success knows enough about the customer's business to connect the dots. And it also means that someone asks the customer's finance director whether the tool is worth the budget, and the answer is yes, with specifics. If you're not woven in, you're a nice to have. And you become a line item on their budget. Maybe a useful one, but you're still a line item. You're not embedded in their business. Then comes stage 6. Stage 6 is all about renewal and potential expansion. And here you have the moment of truth, because this is the point where the cumulative experiences that they've had with you to date are going to show up as a clear run decision to continue or an uphill battle to save them because you have to justify each and every step. I'm sure that sounds familiar. By the time the renewal conversation happens, that decision has already been made based on their experience across those touch points that we've described so far. When those elements do not work well, when the customer realizes that what they've been sold and what's actually being delivered are two different things, if they found the implementation clunky or the time to value too long, or that the customer success team are disconnected from their business and working from a playbook that is not connected to their outcomes, all of these things start to degrade the value and worsen the customer's perception of their partnership with you. And that's where the renewal conversation isn't a decision, but an announcement. So assuming that you've gone into that step, you've got stage 7, which is referring. The simplest question of all is your customer proud to be working with you? And are they proud enough to recommend you to their own network? And if it's yes, then you have a growth engine. They're more likely to commit more budget with you because they see the value in what you're producing and you're a partner working side by side to help their business succeed. If not, then you have a major retention problem. And it's also limiting acquisition because they will speak badly of you. So those two problems are basically there. You get 2 problems for the price of 1. No referral power, no growth from your existing customer, but also potential risks to your new business pipeline. So your new business pipeline is directly impacted by the quality of the customer experience that you're delivering. Essentially, this is the difference between less than 100% net revenue retention and an ability to grow at 115 to 120% net revenue retention consistently. Now, let's look at the next section, because every one of these customers' experiences will be delivered by a person. If you're a B2B SaaS scale-up looking after large, complex customers, that means you cannot get away from having human beings interacting with your customer to deliver value. Because every one of those customers' experiences will have a person involved. And that person is operating within a system or the absence of one. So let's look at what's underneath the hood. We want to start to look at who are the people who sit behind these 7 stages of the customer journey. Every moment that I've just described, whether it goes well or badly, is delivered by a human being. And that's someone who came to work that day with genuinely good intentions. A person who cares about doing a good job or trying their best. But trying inside what? That's the key questions we're asking ourselves here. There are 5 functions that typically touch your customer's journey: sales, customer success, onboarding and implementation, product, and as you scale, RevOps. And here's the problem, is that each of these functions has a different view of your customer's world. Sales knows what's been promised because they were there from the beginning. Customer success knows what's happening in this very moment. Onboarding and implementation knows what happened during the setup. And product knows what features are being used. Finally, RevOps will typically know what the data is saying. But in most companies, none of them have the complete picture. So the customer experiences have 5 different versions inside your company, but they only signed up for one. So let's talk about what each of these people is dealing with. Because every customer pain point has an employee pain point that caused it. And quite frankly, most of those pain points happen at the handoff between 2 functional silos where no one knows who's in the lead. When things go badly, it looks a bit like this. Sales overpromises, and it's not always maliciously. Often it's because they have no shared framework with customer success of what a good fit actually means, and what the product can and can't do at that stage, and what a realistic success timeline looks like. CS, on the other hand, has no business acumen framework. So they're brilliant at understanding the products. They are experts at thinking about how can a customer use the product in the best possible way. They'll know the features, the workflows, the use cases. But if you're asking them to connect the product to their customer's corporate strategy, the way the executive leadership team thinks about ROI, then that's a problem. And most can't. Not because they're not capable, but because no one built that capability within that team. So onboarding has no consistent playbook. and the time to value varies wildly from one customer to the next. Customer A might get there in 30 days, while customer B still struggles after 90. And no one quite knows why, because no one's actually tracking it at the customer outcome level. Then, product is working in a different room. Some customer feedback arrives, gets logged, and then either disappears or gets shaped into a roadmap that the customer success team can't explain to customers in a way that's relevant to them. That translation layer is missing. Product is also being pulled in different directions based on your opinions as a founder as to what they should prioritize and what the sales team is asking for given the market trends and where they're seeing the gaps. All of those competing priorities mean that many things get lost in translation. Finally, it's very likely that your RevOps team is not tracking the right things. They're tracking activity metrics such as the number of calls logged, the number of emails sent, how many tasks have been completed. Those are not outcome metrics. They're really about activity and things that you might be able to easily measure, but don't have a direct customer impact. They don't have an impact on the quality of the customers that you're bringing in through the sales meeting. They don't have impact on the quality of the conversations that customer success is having to link the product to the customer value. And that is a big problem because that is the gap where risks get missed. The outcome metrics that they should be focusing on are things like, what's the value we delivered to the customer? What's the risk that we should be mitigating? And where is the opportunity for expansion created? So data gives the illusion of control and safety when the whole picture from the customer's perspective becomes invisible. And I want to be clear about something. People doing this work are not the problem. The problem is what they've been given to work with, the clarity or lack thereof, the tools or lack thereof, the shared goals or lack thereof. When these things go missing, even the best people will hit a wall. And it's the customer that pays for it. And I've been inside it. I've been a customer success leader who was doing the work of all three functions, trying to compensate for gaps in a system. And I know what it does. Essentially, you burn out. You will burn out your team and your leaders. And still the customers don't get what they need. So it's a lose-lose situation because the problem is never about effort. It's all about the absence of structure that works for your customers and your people. Next, let's look at the infrastructure or the void where it should be. I know what comes to mind when someone says systems and processes, forms, bureaucracy, overhead, things that just slow you down. And that's not what I'm talking about here at all. I want to talk about the systems that are what you build when you respect your people, when you want them to be able to do their best work without having to reinvent the wheel every single time, when you want a customer in month 6 to have the same quality experience as the customer in month 1. Systems are care. The absence of them is not agility. It's a decision to make your people absorb the cost of the chaos. Let me walk you through the 6 systems that are typically going to make a difference. The ones where, when they're present, your people can do their best work. When they're absent, everyone is improvising. The first and key one is role clarity. Who owns what and when? In most scale-ups, the boundary between sales and customer success is blurry. Customer success inherits accounts with no context. Implementation hands off to CS with no standard for what complete means. It means everyone knows what they own and handoffs have a defined shape. Next, let's look at shared metrics. If sales is measured on annual recurring revenue closed and customer success is measured on churn rate, then there's no shared number between them. And you have 2 teams who have legitimately different priorities. Sales wants to close business. Customer success wants to keep it. And neither of these teams are wrong. But without a shared goal, they will in practice compete rather than collaborate. And that's bad news for your customers. What does a shared metric look like? Net revenue retention, logo retention, time to first value, expansion annual recurring revenue. These are things that can only be achieved if both teams are pulling together in the same direction. The third is your systems, your customer relationship management and customer data systems. So the first question to ask yourself is this: if a person left your company tomorrow, would the next person be able to pick up their accounts and know the full picture? The customer's history, their goals, their risks, their key stakeholders, what was promised and what was delivered? In most companies, the answer is no, because the data lives in different tools or in someone's head or in a spreadsheet that's 3 months out of date. A single source of truth for customer data isn't a nice to have. It's the foundation of every handoff, every renewal, and every escalation. Major handoffs include sales to customer success by the time the contract's signed and we're getting to the first kickoff. Customer success to onboarding, where customer success can share the plan and ensure that onboarding is done and implementation is done to the specifications that were promised during the sales cycle. Onboarding back to customer success, a definition of what done looks like and what the next step should be to embed the value of the partnership. Each of these transitions is a moment where things can either flow or break down completely. A good handover is not just a Slack message or a rushed set of notes. It's actually a structured transfer of context. What was promised? What are the customer's goals? And what risks were identified at each step? Who are the key stakeholders? And what are the next milestones? It takes 15 minutes, and it changes the entire customer experience. The next point to look at is customer success plans. These are not activity trackers, not lists of features that the customer uses, but actual plans that are linked to the customer's business goals, with milestones, owners, and a definition of what success looks like at 30, 90, and 180 days, as defined by the customer. When these exist, then there's no surprise with your renewal, it's a conclusion, and a customer success manager can walk into the conversation with evidence of value delivered and a customer who already knows what good looks like. Finally, let's look at the escalation paths. What happens when something goes wrong? Typically, when something goes wrong, and something always goes wrong eventually, doesn't it? Who owns it? And how fast does it get to the right person? What's the protocol to get this resolved? Because without this, your escalation will land on the CS leader's lap at the worst possible moment, with the least possible context and the most possible pressure. We don't need too many cooks in the kitchen. We need clear understanding, clear data, and a common view of what the solution should be. We also need people to take accountability for what's gone wrong, be transparent with customers, and outline a clear path to resolution. None of these 6 things that we've covered here are actually complicated, but they're all decisions. So someone has to decide to build them, or someone has to decide that they're not a priority yet. And that decision has consequences. Those consequences show up in the customer experience, in the employee experience, and eventually in the numbers. I've worked with a team that didn't actually have a clear line of accountability between implementation and customer success. And when there was a problem, the escalations would mean that no one truly took accountability for the resolution. And it happened again and again. The challenge was that there was no underlying system to highlight how to root the issue, who should be accountable for solving it, and what the communication loop to close it should be. It was a disaster, and it really damaged the credibility with the customers that were escalating. They asked themselves whether the company was fit for purpose to manage a large customer of their size if they were not able to have a repeatable, successful process for handling key escalations. And I don't think that's a standalone story. So it's definitely something to consider as you look at these key steps. Now we have 3 layers. We've had the customer experience, the employee experience, and the systems that support them. Every single one of these layers traces back to one decision. And usually it's a decision that's made by one person, the founder. So let's go there next. Here's the thing that it took me years to understand fully. Every gap in the customer experience is caused by a pain point. Every pain point in the customer experience is down to lack of clarity in terms of who owns an outcome. And that impacts the employee experience of the people within those teams. And every employee experience pain point comes from another symptom, which is a lack of system or lack of clarity as to who owns what and how it should be delivered. So the root cause is always a decision, and it's usually one that wasn't made deliberately, or was made under the pressure of early growth when there wasn't time and then never revisited. Essentially, it's a lack of decision by omission. That decision almost always belongs to the founder or co-founders, or at the very least, the founding team. So let me walk you through the 6 that matter the most. The first one is how you resource your customer success function. There is still a version of the conversation happening in boardrooms today where a founder says, we'll hire a CSM at 40K a year and they'll manage the accounts. And they mean well, they're trying to control burn. But a 40K CSM is an operator. It's basically a relationship manager, maybe a troubleshooter at best, who can react efficiently to a problem. Someone who will do the tasks that are in front of them and respond when customers reach out and hopefully log their activity. What builds 120% net revenue retention is a strategic partner, someone who understands the customer's business, is able to read the annual report and understand what it means, has a view on their strategic priorities, and can walk into a room with a senior buyer and have a genuine conversation about what the company is trying to achieve and how your product fits into that. That person, transparently, costs more. They're worth significantly more as well. And the math is not complicated when you think about one saved six-figure annual recurring revenue account. The second is what gets measured at board level. I've been in enough of these conversations to tell you one thing. Board decks give most of their attention to new pipeline, revenue from new logos, customer acquisition payback, months of runway. Customer retention and expansion, on the other hand, are often a paragraph, maybe a chart if you're lucky, and rarely a detailed discussion. Frankly, that's a signal and it's not an accident. It tells every function in the company what the founder and investors actually consider important. And for the customer success teams, watching from the outside clearly gets that message. The third point is this. Does customer success have a seat at the strategy table? And I mean this literally. When the company is deciding which market to move into next, what product feature to build, or what segment to double down on, is the person running customer success in the room or not? They have direct access to what customers actually need, what's working, what's frustrating, and what the unmet demand is. If that intelligence isn't feeding into your strategy, you're making a product and market decision without the most relevant data you have. The next piece is this: how you define success. Adoption metrics are not customer health metrics. Logins, tasks completed, features used, they'll tell you what happened, but they don't tell you what's about to happen. A customer with perfect adoption metrics can still churn if their business has shifted direction and your product no longer solves the problem they care about. You become a nice to have, and you won't see it coming from the data, only when you have a renewal conversation. Customer health is defined by alignment to the customer's goals. The next point is how you translate the mission into daily ownership. Most founders I know can tell you their mission. Far fewer can show how the mission translates into what each person in the company is accountable for, day to day, this week, and next quarter. The gap is not small. When people don't know how their work connects to the big picture, they will optimize for the task in front of them, which is all fine until the task in front of them is not the thing that matters the most. The last point is people management. And this is the one that tends to get deprioritized the fastest, especially in fast-growing companies. The argument is usually, we're moving too fast to slow down for this. But people management is not slowing you down. It's how you multiply the effort of everyone around you, setting clear goals, defining clear standards of what good looks like, providing regular feedback, knowing what the standards are. When this is absent, all your people can do is guess. And a team of 20 people that is doing their best guess, all in slightly different directions, is not 20 units of outputs. It's significantly less. So if you're not managing your people for clarity, then you're creating friction in your own business. So I invite you to ask yourself this question. Do you treat your existing customers as your biggest growth asset, or as revenue already captured and therefore taken for granted and deprioritized? Your answer to that question determines everything in the 3 layers above it. The experience your customers have, the experience your employees have, the systems you build or don't build. Everything flows from there. At Series A, you may still get away with some of this. The team is small enough that people compensate for each other. The founder is still close to customers. The gaps are inconvenient, but not dangerous. At Series B, the dynamics change significantly. You'll have more customers, more customer success managers, more accounts to manage. Founders can no longer be in every conversation. And the gaps that were manageable at 20 people are now systemic at 50. Investor expectations are higher. Your customer expectations are also higher. And the decisions that were left for later are now long overdue. This is not a problem that solves itself at scale. It's one that compounds at scale. Look at this from the outside in. On the top, the customer, the 7 stages of the customer journey. 3 moments where things most commonly break. And the metric is net revenue retention. That number tells you more clearly than anything else whether the system underneath is working or not. The layer below that is the employees. 5 key functions, each touching the customer at different moments, each experiencing their own friction. The metric is CSAT. If the customer satisfaction with your people is not working, then you can see that there's a problem within the environment. And if CSAT is not where you want it, that layer is where you should start to look. One layer down from that, you have systems. Role clarity, shared metrics, data, handoffs, success plans, and escalation paths. Enabling or absent and creating drag for your business. At this point, the metric is how your people feel about their work. And it's not a soft question, it's a strategic one. Here, engagement and employee satisfaction should be the metrics that guide whether you have the right pieces in place or not. And finally, the foundation, which is the founder's decisions. The 6 choices, most of them made without fully realizing that they were choices. How customer success is resourced. What gets tracked at board level? Whether customer success has a voice in that strategy. How success is defined. How missions become ownership. And whether people management is prioritized or deferred. These decisions shape everything above them. If your net revenue retention is not where it needs to be, don't start with a new CS playbook. Don't start with a new tool. Start at the bottom of the diagram and then work your way up. What are the decisions that were made or not made that are now showing up as customer experience problems 3 layers above? That's the evaluation that you need to make and the conversation that I want to have with every founder who's serious about building something that lasts sustainably, does right by their customers and their people. If this landed for you, please let me know in the comment which layer you recognize the most. I read everyone.